If you're just joining us, you've tuned in on a big night here at Fox 23. We're in the middle of interviewing independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who after last week's debate has seen a bump in the polls. To recap real quickly, in the first half of the interview, Kennedy says he does have a path to 270 electoral votes once all of the states finalize their November ballots. He is aiming for numbers similar, if not better, to Ross Perot from the 1992 presidential election, and he wants to position himself as a center-of-the-road alternative to former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden. Now let's get back to this You Decide 2024 exclusive. Here's part 2 of my interview with Bobby Kennedy. What would you say your top, I know this is America, we've got so many problems. What would you say the top 3 issues are if you had to run down real quick about what would your focus be if I said name your top 3 issues that you want to address?
I would say the economy, and the economy. Those are the top 3. Winding down the war machine, getting control of our debt, living within our budget. And that's the only way to deal with inflation long term, protecting the environment, protecting our children's health. We now have the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. We have the highest COVID death rate. We had 16% of the COVID deaths. We only have 4% of the world's population. And the reason for that largely is that we have the sickest population in the world. We have greater chronic disease than anybody. And that's really what was killing people during COVID. CDC said the average American who died during COVID had 3.8 chronic disease. So they had obesity, they had diabetes, they had asthma, and one other thing. Why does no other country have the kind of chronic disease that we do? Well, we know why that is, because we're mass poisoning our population with all of these. We have 1,000 ingredients in our foods that are illegal in other countries. And then other issues are soil regeneration, protecting family farmers, restoring democracy in this country, protecting the Constitution, and ending this toxic division between our people, bridging that divide and making Americans feel like we're all one big family again. Oh, I don't think any of the other candidates are even talking about these issues. Securing the border is critically important. President Trump is talking about those, but that's the only major issue, existential issue that he's actually talking about. And I'm going to secure the border the day that I get into the White House.
So let me ask you this, because you make great points on many topics, but every time I have a conversation with someone about you or your campaign, it always goes back to vaccines and brain worms and just things like that. How do you get the focus back on the issues that matter to people instead of just what is on the fringe and what people associate with you versus what you actually believe? How do you get people to focus at the money?
Rick, I think that is my challenge. And, I have a mainstream media out there that is determined to misrepresent my views, including on vaccines. I've never been anti-vaccine. I've been saying you can go back to 1,000 statements I've made over 20 years. When people tried to apply that pejorative to me that I was anti-vaccine, I've never been anti-vaccine. My position is that vaccines should be tested the same way for safety and efficacy, the same way as all other medications. They're exempt from that kind of testing today. And that people should have informed consent, that people shouldn't be required to take a medical intervention with which they disagree. My biggest point is that there are people who are injured by vaccines, just as there are people who are injured by other medications. But when people claim that, they are treated as pariahs. When people say, I have an injury, or a doctor says, yeah, there are people getting injured, having myocarditis, pericarditis, strokes, neurological injuries, or autoimmune diseases, they're treated as pariahs because this is information in the media and in the public health services that says you're not allowed to talk about that. You have to be gaslighted and told that you're wrong. And that these are rare injuries, and that if you actually talk about them in public, that people will then lose faith in the vaccine program. My position is, even if they're rare, we should be talking about them. We talk about rare cancers in kids. Let's find out what what is causing them, and let's do everything that we can to make vaccines safer so that that doesn't happen anymore. We do this with other vaccines. The only product that you can't that can operate negligently, recklessly, that can injure you, and you can never sue them. So they have a litigation shield. Because of that, it's much more important that we pay attention to them, because the companies that are making them have little incentive to make them safer. So we really need to pay attention to them. And then the other thing is vaccines that are mandated. So there's no market. The federal government is ordering 76 million children to take them. And these are healthy kids. So when you're ordering a healthy person to take a medical product, you have to bend over backwards to make sure that it's safe. And that's not being done. And that's all I've been talking about for years. If somebody wants a vaccine, my presidency is going to do nothing to interfere with that. I think most Americans, if they actually knew the way that I felt about this issue, would 99.9% would agree with me. It's only that I've been portrayed and mischaracterized in a certain way, because that's a way to silence any debate about this important issue.
Mr. Kennedy, I know you are on a time crunch, and I appreciate your time. I know we are out of time. I thank you so much for your time. I know you are a very busy man, and I best of luck on the campaign trail to you, and we will continue to follow this campaign as well. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rick, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.